Alright folks, let's see what we look like. Let's see. Alright, CBR 650R folks. This is what we look like. It actually looks really fast sitting still, not gonna lie. But yeah.
In the last few years, I've bought a bunch of cruisers, but I bought my first sport bike in over 5 years, and that's a 2020 CBR 650R. Seeing the bike now, it looks good, but I got this thing with a bit of a twist. It had a salvage title, and it was in a wrecked state because I got it from an insurance auction lot. This would be my first time physically going to the auction lot and being handed my motorcycle via this nice bulldozer operator. I don't know if bulldozer is the right term, but you get my point. But I got headaches on taking this thing apart, getting it back on the street in this weird Frankenstein way, then putting it all back together again, and then driving through these storms just to have this thing inspected. I've been through a lot with this bike. So with all of that, fast forwarding to now, would I rebuild this bike again given everything that I went through, and with it all put back together, how does it ride? I mean, this is an obvious spoiler, but of course I do it again. I mean, just look at it. It looks really good, and it does look fast sitting still. Except I don't like the way that these mirrors look, but you know, we needed these for the inspection. But here are my impressions on rebuilding this CBR 650R, not just from a ride perspective.
I miss you a lot.
When I got the bike in the garage, the first thing I needed to do was figure out what all was damaged. So that's why I cleaned the bike off, did a little bit of an inspection, peeled some of the pieces back, and that kind of gave me an idea of what I needed to buy, what I could repair, and how I need to go about trying to fix this thing. Looking at the bike now, it's all pretty and put together, but getting these plastics off of this bike took so much more time than I would realize and then appreciate. But I had to do that to figure out what all was broken on this bike. And one of the learning curves of this thing is trying to figure out how all of these individual little pieces like this and this connect to each other. So if you're in the cruiser world, one thing about sport bikes is that there's little brackets that connect other little brackets and plastics that connect other little pieces of plastic. At some point I got super deep in the weeds on this, and I was eventually able to get the majority of these pieces off, and that's when I realized I essentially just needed to get another fairing kit. And I thought I could get away with just buying the pieces that were damaged from Honda, but once I priced them out, I was like, it makes sense to just get an aftermarket solution. Now this is something I call the eBay special. It wasn't an awful idea, but people get new fairings for sport bikes all the time. But I did struggle trying to get this stuff to align properly. And after getting most of the front end installed, or at least this one side, I then realized that the headlight bracket was bent. And I tell you guys, this was a rough day. I was so close, so freaking close to just buying a new bracket. And then I thought, you know what? I got some propane on the shelf. I got a bar. Let me see if I can bend this thing back in place. And surely enough, I was able to do that. But once I got that bracket bent, it allowed everything to kind of go back on like it was supposed to, and I still had a few fitment issues. The visual downfall to having these aftermarket fairings compared to the stock is that they don't have Honda on the side. So, I mean, if you're really looking that close, I feel like you need to be giving me some money at this point. Installing the fairings wasn't too bad once I got over that learning curve and me knowing how this stuff is actually put together. Because at some point you're gonna try to assemble it, and then you're gonna realize, wait, I can't put this part on because I can't access these screws once this is all on the bike. So I had to do the same work multiple times, taking it back apart, put single pieces on, screw those in, bolt them into the bike, and then put the painted pieces on top of that. Again, it was a learning curve. I would buy the kit again, and the only issue I have outside of this is that they gave me a clear visor and not the tinted one that I ordered. Yeah, small annoyance. Besides physically putting the bike back together, one of the biggest challenges I had to overcome was dealing with the ignition system and the key on this bike. This would not be the first bike that I've bought from an auction that didn't have a key, but the difference between this bike and the others is that I had a key fob, and I could kind of bypass some of the security on the key fobs by using the security system from another bike. But on this bike, you have to have the key code, which I did not have, or you need to have a spare key, which I also did not have. The bike came without a key. So luckily this bike does not have the extra security systems that you would see on bikes like in Europe. So all I needed was a new ignition system, which I ended up getting that, the gas cap, and also the rear lock. So
It cost me a little bit of money, but mostly I could have had this bike done faster, so I end up losing a lot of time, but we learned from it.
Your call has been forwarded to an automated voice messaging system. At the tone, please record your
On the
message.
rear end, there's not much to say here other than I love this license plate setup. I designed this in Fusion 360, and I used my new 3D printer, the Bamboo A1, to print this file. And we got two pieces here. We got the actual license plate bracket, and we had the actual plate. But between this and the light, the undertail, pretty much everything outside of the frame has been replaced up under here. And a lot of work went into this, but it cleans up the rear really well. And the cool part about it is that plate has opened the doors up for me for fabrication, and I can use that design on more motorcycles. This plate will actually fit pretty much any motorcycle, but this bracket, I can just tweak it and use it on other motorcycles. But I have so many more ideas to do with this.
With the damage from the accident, there were a few things to work on outside of the fairings, which was the under tray and the tail light. My guess is that when the bike was in an accident, they had just left a gas station because it was full of gas still. They were rear-ended, because looking at the rear end section of this bike, it doesn't look like this damage would come from something as simple as a low side. Like, this looked like it took impact. But again, learning how everything was connected was key here. But the bike held up well considering it protected the harness, other components like the shock, the battery, and the rectifier. But I was surprised that the under tray, this plastic piece, only cost $20. So maybe because it didn't have paint on it, right? But it didn't make much sense for me to keep the original other than the clips and the bushings from it, because it truly was broken, and for 20 bucks, it's just easier to swap it, right? I'd run into a small roadblock, mostly with myself, because I didn't want to clip the original signal lights because they still worked, but I also had a tail light that had integrated signals. But I would eventually get over this, clip the stock signals, and then just bridge that into the tail light, and now I have a full integrated solution in the rear. It cleans it up. The only downside is I do have a slight rapid flash from the lack of a load balancer, because these are LEDs, but I'll still make that decision again.
Moving up to the gas tank, there's not much to say here other than the bar ends and the GP Racing engine guards. They pretty much saved not only the engine, but all of this protected this on both sides from getting scraped up. And honestly, I would rather have bent fairings than having a dented gas tank. So because of this gas tank not being damaged, this is why I went back with the original color, because it didn't make sense to change this. So in that case, I went ahead and went with this. And honestly, the red looks really good on this bike.
Taking off the gas tank, I did get access to see the throttle body area. There was a slight concern from oil on a spark plug, but I was in agreement with a few other people that it's probably just oil passing the seals when the bike was on its side. If the bike is running when it's on its side, basically oil gets in places that it's not supposed to, and there wasn't oil on the tip of the spark plug. It's a theory, but it's a likely one. I changed out the air filter because it had debris on it, but overall there was no damage to the engine. The GP Racing engine guards, they did their job 100%. It protected the engine from damage on both sides. I'm so glad that the previous owner put these on there, and it didn't make sense for me to change these out because I would have had to buy an entire set for both the left and the right, so I just left them as they were. One of the more easier things that I had to deal with on the bike was actually the clip-ons. Both the left and the right clip-on was damaged. And to change them out is actually not that bad, because all you have to do is just take the upper triple off and you just unbolt the left and the right clip-on. The hardest part about this, in my opinion, was actually dealing with the throttle cables and actually disconnecting the wiring harness from the frame. The wiring harness is clipped from behind on the frame, so unless you remove some more stuff, it can actually be a little bit of a challenge. And also the throttle cables, there wasn't much slack in there, so I did struggle with that a little bit. But once I got everything back on, the forks didn't have to be realigned, the lower triple didn't have to be realigned, clip-ons went on, everything works.
The good thing about the front, even though this was a good amount of work on my end and it's some painful work, is it is no longer twisted as far as the infotainment area, because the issue was the headlight bracket was bent, so it was throwing the infotainment off, the headlight was off, and anything that I bolted to the front end was also twisted. So had I not fixed it, the windshield would have actually been angled as well, which would have threw the aerodynamics of the rider triangle off. So I'm glad, even though again it was painful, I had to take everything back off of the front end, bend that headlight bracket back to where it needed to be. But the good news is we got it straight, everything flows and everything looks exactly how it's supposed to, and it's no longer doing a two-step to the right.
In the front fender area, I did have a small issue, a very small issue. of patience, of not wanting to remove the front end, because you know I'm used to cruisers. Because on a cruiser, all you have to do is just unbolt the fender and you're done. But on a sport bike, you got to lift the bike up, take the wheel off just to get the front fender off. So yeah, I made it work. A little sketchy, unconventional, but I made it work.
With this dust seal down here, some people would have replaced this, but I popped that back in because if you didn't, you would have had to take the entire front wheel off, the fender, the fork would have had to come off, and you would have had to rebuild the fork just to get to that dust seal. So I looked at it, didn't have a single crack or anything in it. We put it back and it's been in that same place since I took it off. So not only did we save some money, we saved some time not having to take any of this off outside of the fender. And the rear, the final drive, we could still use a greasing and a cleaning of that chain. The tires, plenty of tread on the back. On the front, plenty of tread also. The brakes, good in the front. Even though we didn't bleed those, they're good up top. And also they are good in the back. Plenty of braking power. For the engine, no leaks, no radiator fluid, no engine oil, nothing out of the ordinary. And that exhaust, my goodness, not loud, but man, does it sound good.
Wondering if this bike is stable and rides straight, it actually does really well. But there are a few things that still are annoying me, like the mirror. It's still kind of moving in different places. This clutch lever, see that? It still does that weird thing. It's not dangerous, it's just a little wonky. Does the bike ride straight? Get off the handlebars. Just tracking straight down the highway. Not diving to the left, not diving to the right. And that's really what's most important on these bikes. Does it ride straight down the highway? If not, is the frame bent? And if the frame is bent, it's gonna handle like crap. It's gonna eat up tires. Yeah, when you turn, you know, left and right, it's not gonna, you know, the steering's gonna feel heavier to one side. Also, you're gonna get these weird steering wobbles like this. Obviously, I'm doing it myself, but got this bike on one of the roads I like to come on, obviously to give it a good rip. Not to go too fast through here, because, well, too fast, I'm already over the speed limit, but critters like to come through here. But I'm still learning this bike. But I can tell you, with everything I've done to it, even though I didn't touch the brakes, I didn't do anything to, you know, steering outside of the clip-ons, no fork oil, you know, no tire pressure changes, nothing, man. No suspension changes with the monoshock in the back. This bike, considering it was wrecked, it's doing fantastic. And I'm not gonna lie to you, it is a lot of fun. But with the screen being straight, like I said, we don't have to worry about this being off center, because had I not fixed this would have been, you would have been looking, I would have been looking down the line of the bike and the fairing would have been off center, and it just would have been, the wind would have been awful probably. It just would have looked aesthetically not right. Plus the headlight, the left side would have been angled different from the right side. So making sure I changed all of that and fixed it, it was major. It sucked, but it paid off in the end. But as far as how this bike rides, man, you've seen it. Going down the highway well above the speed that I should be going. This bike rides stable. It feels safe to ride. There's no weird shakes. There's no weird ticks. It's just a 650, man. The brakes work. Let's see, actually. ABS. Yeah, man, this thing's hidden, bro. This thing is hidden. Every way this bike needs to hit, it is hitting. It is hitting, man. Look at this. Bike's just tracking down the road, man. It's not like diving or anything. It's just I can take my hands off the bars and I can confidently say I know where this bike is gonna go, and that's what you want. Let's see here, man. Just look at this thing. This bike, man, it's freaking beautiful. I'm actually fixing my jacket. Such a beautiful bike. It rides like it's supposed to. Temperatures are starting to drop a little bit. Everything is spot on. There's nothing wrong with this bike, man. And it's making me want to keep one of these things permanently because I miss it so freaking much. And getting this bike for this deal makes it even better. See over this hill. My goodness, man. And it's just a 650, dude. This thing's so much fun. It rides, it handles so well, man. It's stable. I know I keep saying that everything, the question, how does it ride? It rides exactly how it's supposed to. And that's what matters.
With this bike now street legal, it can be ridden on the street, go to bike meets, do burnouts, carb twisties, do wheelies, all of that. Get full coverage insurance, everything, tag, all that. So yeah, I would totally rebuild this bike again, especially considering how much I paid and how much I have all in on this bike. One of the biggest questions I get about rebuilt bikes is not only how to get them from the auctions, but how much do I have into the bike money-wise? Like, does it make sense to get the bike from the auction or just buy it used or buy it new? Well, I'm gonna break all of that down, so you can click right here and check that video out. And as always, thanks for listening to my story. I hope you learned something. I'm about to get back on this bike and go for a ride. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.